Before we begin, thank you very much to Scrapnel for joining the Patreon campaign. Welcome back. Good to see you back. You pitched in at the high mark, so you got a review request. I haven't checked my folder to see if you put one in or not. But regardless, thank you very much for the generous support. Everyone for supporting. It definitely helps keep the channel going. I'm not lying when I say it's the reason I can keep doing this grind. Speaking of this grind, we are about to hit a huge milestone. Next Tuesday is going to be the 2-year anniversary of the daily content grind. And it shocks me that I'm actually still able to keep it up. It's pretty incredible. I thought I'd be out of ideas like over a year ago, but here we are. We're still going. And to help celebrate, I'm actually going to be appearing live on Twitch on someone else's Twitch channel. This guy. This is Red Claw. He is a dinosaur VTuber. He does a bunch of variety streams. He does art. He does Final Fantasy XIV. Really cool guy and big Transformers nerd. So next Tuesday, we are going to be doing the history of Transformers live on stream, so you can interact with us, ask questions, just have general fun, just hanging out with two Transformer nerds. One of which is an animated dinosaur. So, I'm really looking forward to that. But let's get on to today's particular topic, because this one is a little bit infamous. We're going to be discussing AKOM Productions. So, AKOM is one of the animation studios behind Generation 1 Transformers, and it is known to be one of the lower-end animation studios from the 80s and the 90s. Keep in mind, the first season of Transformers was 22, 24 episodes, somewhere around there. It's a pretty thin episode list is what it is. But point being, once they got into the second season, AKOM, they started producing a lot more. They started having to produce a lot more episodes because now they had over 50 episodes to fill in a single year. So in order to counteract that, and just so no one corrects me, it's 16 episodes in season 1. Just to counteract that, Sunbow started issuing out episode orders to lots of different animation studios, and AKOM is one of the cheaper ones that went in for Transformers, and they took up most of season 3 as well. To say they are infamous is to put it mildly, to say the least. So just for starters, let's kind of talk their resume a little bit, and we'll just kind of go over a few of the things that they had actually produced. So there are some actual like heavy hitter animation studios and like animated series that they actually did. So like for instance, they did the first 11 seasons of Arthur. They did episodes for Bucky O'Hare, Conan the Adventurer, Dino Riders, Earthworm Jim, Gargoyles. They did Gargoyles episodes, Muppet Babies, obviously Tiny Toon Adventures, Animaniacs as well. And just there's a whole bunch of lists. They did My Little Pony and My Little Pony the movie, Peter Pan and the Pirates, which I reviewed once upon a time. Yeah, and the list goes on and on. They've had their hand in a ton of different shows because they were the one to go to when you need an episode produced quickly and cheaply. Now, today, they're kind of known by their reputation for just really poor quality, but that said, that doesn't necessarily mean they're incapable of poor quality, and it doesn't mean it's dissuaded them from getting work. They are actually still active today, and we'll get to that here in a minute. But the infamy, if you know AKOM from outside of Transformers, it's most likely for Batman the Animated Series, because it's the studio that was very famously fired by Bruce Timm for producing episodes of such bad quality that they did not want it in their show anymore. So keep in mind, in the 80s and 90s especially, it was really just a vehicle for selling toys. It didn't really matter how good the animation was. Did it tell the story? Did it show how cool the characters were to make the toys sell? Yes, good enough, put it on TV. But remember, Batman the Animated Series is one of those first shows that really took itself seriously as animation, and the purpose of it was to create really solid stories, and thus the toys would become desirable because, yes, the quality was so high. That's the idea behind Batman the Animated Series. And for the most part, it worked. It's regarded as a classic, and the designs from that animation, from that cartoon, are still being used for toys today. The screen cap you see here, though, is from an episode called Cat Scratch Fever, which was famously done so poorly that they actually ordered AKOM to redo the episode from scratch. And this is still how it turned out. It's still not a good-looking episode. So this got them fired. And apparently it was the first time they'd ever been fired off of a product, because afterwards they still had a few episodes to produce for the series, and they actually came up with much better quality there. There's a few weird ironies to that. I mean, for starters, this particular episode was noted by the producers as being like one of the worst, like the one they liked the least out of the whole series. But funny stories would come out from this show from AKOM. Apparently, writers used to just kind of like sit together and live in fear that the script they just finished was going to go to AKOM, because obviously they wanted to tell good stories, but the last thing they wanted was for it to come back with dismal animation, right? So it created a weird atmosphere in that studio. But that's not to say they didn't do good work. Obviously, when we talk about shows like Tiny Toons, they didn't do every episode, but they actually did some episodes that were pretty good. And there's weirdness to AKOM. So, for instance, they still work on The Simpsons. They still do Simpsons episodes. So, they're still in production. They still exist, and they're still making money. Now, something like The Simpsons kind of plays to their more simple art style and animation, but at the same time, AKOM has this weird thing where the animation actually, even though it looks really cheap and they make a lot of errors, you actually get more animation cells than you do from a lot of shows. They actually had like a little bit smoother, more fluid animation, which is kind of a weird trade-off. More to the point, it's a pretty infamous animation studio. And when it comes to Transformers, there's pretty easy ways of telling if you're watching an AKOM-produced episode. For starters, as you can see here, animation models can vary wildly from the ones you are used to. So things like Optimus Prime here, the backpack would constantly change color. A few details would be off here and there, especially like they like to paint the entirety of like the crest on his helmet instead of just the front. It'd be the whole mohawk. Other famous ones are like anytime you see Rodimus Prime with his vehicle mode windshield on his waist, that was an AKOM thing. Apparently they got a lot of the early draft of the animation models and never got the updated ones. So a lot of times their models were completely off and outdated. Kind of strange. Other tall tale signs that you are watching a AKOM episode, typically the shading is a lot more simple. Usually it's just down the side and there's no like sheens or glossiness to the surface of the Transformers to give them like a metallic look. That would be absent. That's not typical. Like that does happen a lot, but it's not like every single time. But you can tell when AKOM is cheaped out when that is what's going on. Also, AKOM things, their colors and their animation tends to be a little bit darker and duller. And again, you're going to notice like the animation is a little bit more smooth and fluid, but it makes it look odd. Like AKOM episodes just look odd compared to a lot of the other G1 that you could see. So let me give you an example. I'm going to show you now a screen cap from every episode that we know AKOM did. Now, we have not every animation studio is known right now. There are still studios that worked on G1 episodes that we have no idea what studio they were. And a lot of these that come from episodes that are unattributed, but they share the tall tale signs. I keep using tall tale. I don't know if I'm using that phrase correctly. I'm probably not. They share the same signs of a AKOM episode. Animation models that typically aren't used elsewhere, coloring errors that are typical to them, things like that. Just things that make you notice this is done by somebody in particular. So, for instance, if we start with things like City of Steel, I remember like when you looked at segments of Optimus Prime disassembled and instruction, like there's weirdness to how it is animated. Like it just looks odd, especially a lot of the effects look odd. You can see here the layering errors where Ironhide actually is appearing in front of Optimus Prime, and Blue Streak should be behind everybody, except he's in front. Common animation error to be out, off the layers, right? Episode 23 was the Autobot Run. That one was also an AKOM mess of an episode. We've seen this screenshot before. So I just did an episode about visual errors in Transformers. We're going to see a few of those, but I tried not to recycle them. I tried to give you at least new examples, even if we're covering some of the same ground here. Another episode in season 2 was The Core. I hate this episode. Not only is this episode very oddly animated, but this seems to have suffered from either a storyboard or direction issue, because the way it's written, it is written as if the drill that's going into the Earth's core and threatening to blow up the planet is its own independent machine that is tunneling down to Earth, kind of like the pneumatic modules from Ninja Turtles. Rather than being a surface machine with a drill that was going all the way down, they drew it like an auger, like there's a machine on the surface that they can interact with, because at no point does anyone just go, let's smash the machine in order to stop it from drilling to the core. No, their solution is that Devastator has to drill down to the center of the Earth and catch it before it reaches the core. Again, why couldn't you just break the machine on the surface? The only way it makes sense is if AKOM screwed up so massively that they drew an auger for a drill with instead of like its own machine just going down into the Earth. It makes it for an incredibly odd episode. I can't confirm that's the error that happened, but it feels like that's what they did. From here on, we go into season 3. So obviously they only touched on a little bit of season 2, but season 3, oh, this is where they made their money. It's important to note that the guy who founded AKOM was a producer on the first season of Transformers, which is how he probably got so much work for his animation studio off of this series. So keep in mind there's like a little bit of grandfathering in here, a little bit of subtle nepotism going on in order to get such a bad studio on such a popular series. And it starts with Five Faces of Darkness, and this makes me sad. Five Faces of Darkness is not only like some of my favorite episodes story-wise in Transformers, it's some of the most important episodes in Transformers fiction. It establishes the origin of Transformers in the original fiction. It tells you why the quintessons from the 86 movie are important. It tells you what the matrix of leadership actually is, rather than just being like basically a battery with handles that it was in the 86 movie. It tells you how important it really is, being the vessel that houses the wisdom of all Autobot leaders prior. That's a really important thing to mention. That's a really important thing to mention. So that is a big, so I hate that such a bad studio animated such a good episode. Here's episode 2. And you can see, again, like this whole 5-parter is just riddled with animation errors. I could go on for days about just these episodes. And for some reason, it's a lot of the Decepticons they screwed up. I just noticed that like all the screen caps I took for these episodes, they're all Decepticon scenes. I don't know why Rumble is as big as Soundwave here. That doesn't seem like it would work. Here's episode 3, where you have all the Combaticons together with Bruticus. Because, again, this is where I feel like things go wrong on a direction standpoint, or where they're given the script that describes the scene, and then whoever does the storyboarding doesn't know characters apart. An animation error like this happens when someone says, all the Combaticons are together in this particular shot. Well, their listings includes Bruticus as a Combaticon, so they drew him in. Duh, it's stupid. It's stupid to us, but it feels like a direction failure, right? And then we get episode 4, and this famous animation error that should have spawned a dozen FunPub exclusives, but somehow didn't. And then, yeah, episode 5, where you see a whole horde of Cyclonuses taking off from Cybertron. And again, I could have picked so many screen caps from these episodes. I could have picked so many. AKOM took a few episodes off and came back in episode 73, Dark Awakening, where again you're going to see a lot more of the inconsistency in the animation, a lot more of the darker shades, and a lot more of the duller colors. You can see they're at least trying in some of the shots for the shading, but it's very inconsistent from what I remember in this episode. The next episode was Forever is a Long Time Coming. I want you to keep in mind, this Dark Guardian robot is supposed to be the size of Omega Supreme. That's Ram Horn. He's a cassette. AKOM animation errors are their own special kind of drug, you know? So let's move on, because we still got a bunch of these episodes that we can go through. They showed up again in Starscream's Ghost, which again isn't terribly bad for an episode. They actually did put a little bit more effort into these, but it's wildly inconsistent. That's the problem with AKOM. Episode 76, Thief in the Night, likewise, isn't terrible. I don't remember any terribly big, egregious errors from it. Likewise, they took a few episodes off. They came back in 80 with Ghost in the Machine. I don't know what it is, but this like dull surprise expression was just their go-to. And for some reason, I found it on a lot of shots of Blaster. I don't know what it was about them wanting to torture Blaster in a lot of these scenes, but they did. And again, that's another one with several animation errors I could have chosen. We went with this one. And then there's the next episode they did, which was episode 82. Carnage in C minor. Again, I could do an entire episode dedicated just to the animation errors in this one episode alone. Let's quickly go through a lot of their others just to make sure we cover everything. So here's the Quintesson Journal, where again we see that simplistic animation and shading style in full effect. Episode 85, The Big Broadcast of 2006. I don't find anything terribly egregious with this shot, other than I just think it's hilariously framed. They did episode 88, Only Human, and I feel like they're much better at animating human characters. I almost wonder if it's just something about the robotic characters that they're not quite proficient with. But when it comes to the human characters, it's actually not too bad. Like, this episode's actually kind of passable. 89, Grimlock's New Brain. Slight bit of scaling issue here with Hunger, who seems to already be the size of Abominus while he chews down on Hot Rod. Hot Rod being in the episode, not an animation error. They specifically explain it, and that was directly intentional. But again, I do hate that the introduction of my favorite combiner team ends up being an AKOM episode. There's also episode 92, The Face of the Nijika. I don't have to explain why I picked this animation frame, do I? It's just so odd. It's just so odd. Poor Perceptor. And you can see the more infamous animation error for Rodimus, where, yeah, they put the windshield color on his pelvis, like that's how his hood transformed. And beyond that, they also did the final 3 episodes, the entirety of Season 4. They did Rebirth. So their animation style is very prevalent in that one. The colors are very dark in the Rebirth. A lot of the colors are washed out. And yeah, animation errors galore, as well as things like Bumblebee and Goldbug showing up in the same shot, Optimus Prime here being off-model, and weird things like how not huge these guys are when they are being drawn. You know, odd choices like that. It's a wonder they got that much work considering how bad the season 2 episodes were. Like I said, there's a little bit of favoritism because of the guy who ran the company. But regardless, AKOM is known with infamy. If you're a Transformer fan, it means you're watching a terribly made episode. These days, they do seem to be better. They do seem to be producing consistent work, at least, the little work that they seem to still be doing. And like I said, it's not that they're always terrible. It's just when they're making robots, just for some reason, I don't know. They let the interns draw it. That's the best guess that I've got. So there's your rundown. There's every episode to watch out for. If you just want to go through and just like have a day where it's just you and your buddies laughing at how bad the G1 cartoon is, I basically just gave you a list of episodes to go through. And that's not even including the other studios that also produced bad episodes. You know, AKOM didn't touch Bot. AKOM didn't touch Child's Play and how horrible some of those errors were in that episode. So it's not always them, but, you know, if it's an AKOM episode, expect unintentional laughs. So, there you go. Yeah, I hope that was at least educational to somebody out there. Avoid them or watch them for the ironic humor. Your choice. But regardless, thank you for watching. I will see you next time.
I'm like, I think you guys got this. I will back away, and I will see you all later.
You've got this handled.
Alafi's like, really? You're not gonna help me? Like, it's fine now.
It's like these disgusting creatures breathing down my neck, and you're all just like, I believe in you. You got this.
All right, you seem to have this. 5 minutes.